In the town of Silver Ridge, New Mexico, where the houses in Emerald Oaks glowed with winter lights, a family tragedy was slowly unfolding. Mateo Delgado, 65, a retired builder, a father who sacrificed his entire life for his son, was now cast aside by his own blood. Facing him was the Rossi family, Carlo and Teresa, powerful in-laws, along with Alessia, the arrogant daughter-in-law. Mateo had carried everything, from the $3,250 each month for 4 years to cover the mortgage, to the down payment, the renovations, the furniture. Nearly $270,000 had vanished from his pocket. All of it so that Lucas, his son, could live in the house Mateo believed was a happy home. But it was there, on Christmas, that Mateo received a blow like a knife to the chest. He was not invited to dinner. In Silver Ridge, where reputation in the community mattered more than truth, Mateo was seen as a burden, but inside him, the fire of defiance ignited. This was not just the story of a forgotten father, but the beginning of one of the bitterest revenge stories. Mateo knew well what he was about to do would change everything. This was only the beginning. On the western outskirts of Silver Ridge, where the red sand hills stretched endlessly to the horizon, there stood a small house tucked into the Pueblo Heights neighborhood. This was where Mateo Delgado had lived alone for 8 years, since his wife, Elena, passed away from illness. The house was modest, with a brown tile roof and porch steps still streaked with faded paint. But inside, everything was kept in order, almost to the point of austerity. Mateo had always been a man of discipline. In his younger years, he worked as a builder, later running a small contracting business. Every brick, every layer of mortar had to be precise. He carried that same discipline into his life. Meals at set times, morning walks around Maple Creek Park, evenings spent reading the paper with a small glass of whiskey. On the desk in the corner of his living room sat a wooden box. Inside were neatly stacked receipts, organized by year, by month. Some had already turned yellow. It was a habit Mateo had kept his whole life, saving every document from building supply invoices during his contracting days to modern bank statements. To him, paperwork was the trace of truth, something that never lied. Evidence, documents, 2019-2023, bundle of monthly transfer receipts. Mateo had only one son, Lucas Delgado. When Elena died, Lucas was just over 30, newly married to Alessia Rossi. Mateo thought, at least his son had found an anchor. He wouldn't be too lonely. He was ready to sacrifice so Lucas could build a life without worry. That was why, when the young couple wanted a house in Emerald Oaks, where property prices were sky-high, Mateo didn't hesitate. He refinanced his own home, pulled out $55,000 for the down payment, then set up an auto transfer of $3,250 each month from his personal account into Lucas's mortgage account to keep the payments steady. "Just focus on work, son, I'll handle the rest," Mateo said, laying a hand on Lucas's shoulder as they signed the papers. Lucas's eyes welled up. "Dad, I don't know what to say except thank you." Alessia stood beside him, smiling brightly, though something unreadable flickered in her eyes. At first, Mateo often visited Lucas's house. He installed the kitchen cabinets himself, relaid the hardwood floors, hung the curtains. Once, when Alessia complained their old couch didn't match modern style, Mateo bought a brand new sofa. Upstairs sat the kitchen master mixer Alessia had demanded, over $2,000, used only twice before collecting dust. Every time Mateo saw it, he sighed but never said a word. Friends often asked, "Why do you keep paying Mateo? Lucas has a job." Mateo would only smile. "He's my son. If I don't help him, who will?" It was a simple faith, almost naive, that he carried in his heart. But slowly, the distance began. Lucas grew busy with his real estate work, calling his father less. Shared dinners grew rare. Instead came the glittering Rossi family parties, where Mateo was seldom invited. And when he was, he sat quietly in the corner, a glass of water in hand, listening to conversations about European vacations, art auctions, and golf memberships. Once, Mateo tried to chime in. "I used to build at a desert resort. We had to engineer walls to withstand the sun." Alessia smiled thinly, her voice sharp. "Dad, nobody here really knows construction. I'm sure they'd find it hard to follow." Lucas quickly changed the subject, leaving Mateo with an ache of humiliation. Still, he endured. He believed Lucas would eventually understand. And whenever he looked at the thick stack of bank statements in his wooden box, he told himself. This is the proof of a father's love. One day, he'll see it. Evidence: bank statements, 2020 to 2023, $3,250 monthly transfers to Lucas's account. Evenings in Pueblo Heights. Mateo often stood on his porch. The yellow porch light flickered weakly, long overdue for repair. But every spare dollar had gone to Emerald Oaks. He leaned on the wooden railing, staring toward the dark hills, wondering how much longer before he could live for himself. Another habit of Mateo's was photography. He carried an old Canon camera on walks through Maple Creek Park. He loved capturing children running, Christmas lights twinkling, or simply the sun setting behind rooftops. Through the lens, the world still looked glowing, peaceful. But inside him, the emptiness kept growing. Then one December afternoon, as Mateo was sorting through old receipts, his phone buzzed. The screen lit with Lucas's name. Mateo answered eagerly, his voice filled with warmth. "Hello, Lucas, my boy." Lucas's voice came slowly but firmly. "Dad, this year you won't be coming to Christmas with us." Mateo froze. The statement slipped from his hand, fluttering to the floor. Outside, a cold wind rattled the window frame, humming a chilling note. And that was only the beginning. That evening, the sky over Silver Ridge was heavy with gray clouds, the dim streetlights casting a pale glow on the path in front of Mateo's house. He sat in his old wooden chair beside the desk, carefully sorting through a stack of bank papers. The December statement had just arrived, the familiar $3,250 shining clearly on the page. Mateo frowned, placing it atop the pile of receipts that now reached his elbow. He hadn't yet filed it away when the phone buzzed. On the screen appeared the name Lucas Delgado. A warmth flickered through him, and he answered at once. "Son, I just got the statement, everything's fine. I was thinking tomorrow I'd send a little extra too." Lucas cut in, urgent but dry. "Dad, I'm calling about something else. This Christmas, don't come." Mateo froze. He thought he had misheard. "What did you say? Don't come to your house for Christmas?" On the other end, Lucas sighed. "Alessia already arranged things. Her parents want their own tradition. They think having you there would make things awkward." The room grew cold, though the fireplace still burned. Mateo slowly stood, walking toward the window. Outside, Christmas lights twinkled, but in his eyes it was only darkness. "Awkward? Awkward how, Lucas? This is your house, the house I—" Lucas interrupted, voice trembling but firm. "Dad, please don't make this harder. I promise we'll meet next week, but Christmas Eve? There won't be a place for you." Mateo felt his chest tighten. He looked around the familiar room. The warm yellow desk lamp, the wooden box filled with hundreds of receipts, Elena's smiling photo on the shelf, all bore witness as his own son cast him out. Mateo's voice dropped, almost a whisper. "Do you know what you just said? You just told your father, the man who's paid the mortgage for 4 years, who covered the down payment, not to step foot into that house on Christmas Eve." Silence. Then only a long breath before the line ended with a cold click. Mateo stood stunned, phone still in his hand. He staggered back to the desk, dizziness rising. Just then, the screen lit again. A new email notification. He opened it, and his eyes froze. Evidence, email, 12/15/2023, 9:04 p.m. Lucas to Alessia, "I told Dad. He won't be coming to Christmas. You and your parents can relax, no surprises." Mateo set the phone down on the desk, hands shaking. It wasn't just a sudden decision. This had been agreed upon, a plan made in advance, involving Lucas's wife and the Rossi family. Rage surged, hot at the base of his neck, exploding into a shout that echoed through the empty house. "Elena, do you see this? Our son has abandoned his own father." He dropped into the chair, face in his hands. Memories of little Lucas came rushing back. The toddler wobbling on a concrete job site, his first ride on a bike at sunset, the bright eyes when Mateo built him a backyard fort, all shattered like glass. Mateo forced himself up, pulling open a drawer. He dragged out the loan papers from that first year he'd helped Lucas buy the house. Every signature, every number seemed to mock him. He gripped the pages so hard his nails left marks. "I traded away my old age, my own home, for what? A locked door on Christmas Eve." Outside, the wind howled, scattering the last dry leaves. Shadows pressed against the glass. Mateo's gaze fell on the wooden box filled with statements, receipts, loan papers. His eyes lit with something new, pain mixed with resolve. This Christmas would be empty. No laughter, no shared glances. But deep inside, Mateo realized this rejection was more than betrayal. It was the first toll of a different bell. Not just the loss of family, but the opening of a war. He placed his old Canon camera beside the stack of papers. Something was forming in his mind, still faint but sharp, his lips pressed tight, as if making a vow to himself. Mateo didn't know that phone call tonight was just the spark. Worse blows were waiting, from the very people who once called him family. He didn't yet know. But worse was coming. 2 days after the phone call, while Mateo was still drowning in the sting of rejection, the phone rang again. This time, it was Carlo Rossi. Her voice came through, sweet but laced with that familiar command. "Dad, this afternoon at 2, make sure you're at the airport to pick up my parents. Their flight's from Phoenix, Carousel 3. Dress properly, the blue shirt, they notice details, don't let them down." Mateo gripped the phone. A long silence stretched before he asked, "Alessia, did you forget something? You and Lucas just banned me from Christmas, and now you want me to play chauffeur?" Alessia let out a short laugh. "Family helps each other, Dad. Don't make this more dramatic than it needs to be." Mateo slowly hung up. He sank into the chair, his heart pounding. For years he had been the family's walking wallet. Now they wanted to make him their free driver. Humiliation surged inside, but he said nothing. At 2 p.m., inside Silver Ridge Regional Airport, Carlo and Teresa Rossi pulled their suitcases, scanning the crowd for Mateo. When he never appeared, they were forced to call a taxi. The $45 fare was nothing, but for them it was humiliation. Back in his small Pueblo Heights house, Mateo sat calmly with a cup of tea. For the first time in years, he had said no. The next morning, Mateo opened the Silver Ridge Chronicle. Page 3, a large column. Local businessman abandons in-laws at airport in freezing winds. Beneath it was his photo, lifted from his old company website. The article described Carlo and Teresa stranded, left waiting in dangerous cold. In truth, the day had been 55 degrees and sunny, but the piece painted it like a blizzard. Evidence, printed paper 12/18/2023, Chronicle article, elderly couple stranded for hours. Mateo read each line, his hands trembling. In the margins, he scrawled in red, "Lies. Weather 55 degrees Farf." They took a 20-minute taxi. Fury spread through him. He called Lucas, but the call rang out then cut off. He texted, but no one replied. By afternoon, a neighbor stopped by. An older woman asked softly, "Mateo, is what the paper says true?" He choked. "No, not at all." But doubt clouded her eyes. The fake story had seeded itself. Mateo suddenly felt isolated, even in the community where he had lived for decades. That evening, Lucas showed up at his door. He didn't knock, just stood on the porch, arms crossed. Mateo opened the door, caught between hope and anger. Lucas spoke flatly. "Dad, why'd you do it? You embarrassed Mom. The paper's all over it, people are talking everywhere. Do you know what this does to me?" Mateo stared, then let out a bitter laugh. "What it does to you? You think your reputation matters more than truth? They wrote me up as if I abandoned old people in a snowstorm, while you know damn well it was sunny." Lucas turned away, unable to meet his father's eyes. "You were wrong not to pick them up. You should understand that." Mateo's voice hardened. "Wrong? Wrong was paying more than $165,000 in mortgage for you. Wrong was giving you that Emerald Oaks house. Wrong was believing you would stand by me." Lucas said nothing. He stepped down from the porch, leaving Mateo alone in the dark house. For the first time, Mateo saw his son not as the boy he once raised, but as a man who had chosen his side, and it wasn't his father's. Evidence, text message. 12/18/2023, 10:07 p.m., Alessia to her mother. He refused to go to the airport. "But it's fine. The paper printed exactly as planned. Now everyone thinks he's awful." Mateo printed the message and slid it into the growing folder on his desk. Every piece of evidence was another knife in the trust he once held for his family. 3 blows in a row. From an absurd demand, to a slanderous article, to the accusing eyes of his own son. Mateo felt erased from his family, from his community, from the very life he had built. It was as if a tightening noose left no room to breathe. He sat in his small room, the desk lamp casting sharp light across his wrinkled face, his shaking hands sorting the files again. In his mind, a burning thought roared. They've gone too far. They think lies can bury the truth. Mateo drew a deep breath, staring at Elena's photo on the shelf, whispering, If they want a war, they'll have one. Across town, inside the glowing Emerald Oaks home, the Rossi family was busy plotting their next move. What they didn't know was this time, in their arrogance, they were about to overreach. Pushing past the limit, right into the pit Mateo had already begun to dig. In the days after the article, Mateo walked the streets with heavy eyes. At the Silver Ridge Farmers Market, he heard whispers behind him. That's Delgado, the one who abandoned his in-laws at the airport. He turned, catching glances that mixed pity with contempt. The man who had built homes for others was now painted as someone who neglected the elderly. Mateo clenched his jaw. He knew someone was pulling strings, but the face had not yet appeared. Then the chance came. One morning, sitting in a small cafe near the square, he overheard two local businessmen chatting. Rossi's clever. Just one phone call and that article appeared. His old bank connections still carry weight. Mateo froze. He gripped his coffee cup so tightly it burned his palm. Carlo Rossi. At last, the name surfaced, like the hand behind the curtain pulling every string. That night, Mateo couldn't hold back. He dialed Carlo directly. The man's voice on the other end was calm, casual. Mateo, I figured you'd call. Better accept reality. You're too old, too outdated. Our family needs a clean picture, not some builder with rustic habits. Mateo choked. I raised Lucas. I paid the mortgage. Carlo cut him off, voice slow, almost like a favor. Exactly, and you'll keep doing it. Otherwise, that house collapses, and with it, the last of your reputation disappears. Mateo slammed the phone on the table. His hands shook with fury. Carlo's words weren't a request. They were an ultimatum. Mateo began to see himself trapped, one man against the entire Rossi clan, now with the whole town leaning their way. That weekend, Lucas came to his father's house, bringing 2 bottles of wine for the first time. Mateo felt a flicker of joy, thinking his son had come back. But once the cork was pulled, Lucas spoke low. Dad, you need to understand. Alessia's parents have status here in Silver Ridge. They're protecting me. If you fight them, I'll lose everything. So please, let things stay as they are. Don't make it harder. Mateo set his glass down, his voice hoarse. You mean you want me to keep paying the mortgage, while you forbid me from stepping into your house? Lucas didn't answer. He only bowed his head, avoiding his father's gaze. Mateo's chest felt like stone. His whole life, he had believed his son was his anchor. Now Lucas had leaned entirely to Rossi. The truth was bare. He had lost Lucas, and lost his place as father in his own family. Another night, while sorting papers, Mateo stumbled on an old email still stored in his inbox. It was a misforward from Lucas, sent to the wrong address. Mateo read, each word burning into his eyes. Evidence, email, 12/20/2012 a.m. Carlo to Patricia, Chronicle editor. Attached is a photo of Mateo Delgado from the company website. The piece must run before Christmas. Emphasize how he abandoned the elderly in a storm. Mateo gripped the mouse, breathing hard. This was the smoking gun. Carlo had directly manipulated the press. He printed the email, slid it into his folder. But instead of feeling stronger, Mateo felt hollow. A man like Carlo could pick up a phone, order a paper, build a false story. Mateo was just an old man in a cramped house, clutching files. In the final days of December, Mateo nearly gave up. He skipped the market, stopped his Maple Creek walks. Neighbors averted their eyes. In his mailbox appeared a strange flyer. Need a builder? Don't call Delgado. He abandoned his own family. What could he do for you? He didn't need to guess the source. Mateo sat by the fireplace, eyes locked on Elena's photo. He whispered, I've lost it all, Elena. They've turned me into a disgrace. Even Lucas has turned away. Christmas loomed, and he believed he had lost. This fight was never even. Rossi held all the cards. Yet in that moment of despair, Mateo's eyes fell on the wooden box on the desk. Inside, the thick stack of statements, each page marked with the number $3,250 leaving his account every month, 48 months in a row. Mateo picked up a sheet, smoothing its edges. He whispered, These papers, these are the weapons. An idea slid into his mind, faint at first, then sharper. He didn't need to fight Rossi in the press. He had his own rule of the game, the auto-transfer he himself had set. If it had begun with that, then the counter-strike would begin there too. Mateo's lips curved into the first smile in weeks. The Rossi storm that seemed to drown him, they didn't know he was holding the fuse. And once he lit it, everything would turn. That night he sat quietly by the fire, but inside a new light burned. Not defeat anymore, but the birth of a plan. A plan that could shatter the illusion Rossi had built for years. He looked out the window where the Silver Ridge winds swept the dark. His mouth tightened, his eyes hard. Because from this moment, he would begin his revenge, built on the very set-up rule they never saw coming. Mateo Delgado sat in his small Pueblo Heights home, the firelight flickering across the thick stack of papers spread over the table. After weeks of isolation and slander, he had reached the bottom of endurance. But at that bottom, a plan began to form. Clear, precise, like the blueprints of the buildings he had once built his whole life. In his mind, he gave it a name: cage. A steel cage that would lock the Rossi family step by step, until they collapsed under their own weight. Collect, gather the evidence. First, he needed every piece to turn truth into a weapon. Mateo opened the wooden box, arranging statements in chronological order. Each month from the very first year, $3,250. Not a single entry missing. Evidence statements 2019-2023, auto transfer from Mateo's account, Lucas. Then came the down payment receipt, $55,000 pulled from his home refinance. Next, invoices for the kitchen remodel, hardwood floors, curtains, even the sofa Alessia had demanded. He marked them in red pen. Paid by MD. Mateo also printed screenshots of Alessia's social media. A post boasting, "Emerald Oaks finally feels like home, #blessed." Another showing the granite kitchen with the caption, "Dream Kitchen, thanks to us working hard." Mateo underlined us. Finally, the misforwarded email, the one where Carlo had instructed the Chronicle editor. Evidence, email, 12/20/2023, Carlo directing smear article. He bundled it all into a thick folder, tied tight with string. Collect was complete. 2. Align, secure allies and resources. Mateo knew he couldn't fight alone. He thought of our resources, his sister Rosa and her family. Rosa wasn't wealthy, but her husband sat on the neighborhood council. If needed, they could vouch that Mateo was nothing like the unstable man the paper described. And then, his habits, saving receipts, photos, his old Canon camera, these too were resources. That camera had once captured Alessia partying, Lucas spending lavishly, while Mateo quietly patched their roof. Those photos could now serve as counterpoints. One night, Rosa came by. Mateo spread the papers on the table, voice low but firm. "Rosa, look. They've painted me as someone who abandoned them. But these papers, this is the truth." She picked up a statement, eyes widening. "My God, you've paid for 4 years? Brother, why didn't you say?" Mateo gripped her shoulder. "Now I need you to keep it quiet. When the time comes, I'll reveal everything. But I need at least one person in this family who still believes me." Rosa nodded hard. "You won't be alone." Mateo smiled faintly. A line had succeeded. 3. Gamble. The risky move. Mateo knew the massive risks waiting. Risks. If the Rossis discovered he was preparing a counterattack, they could twist it with media or even sue him for defamation. If Lucas felt cornered, he might cut ties completely, and Mateo would lose the last thread of family. And if he miscalculated, the entire Silver Ridge community would see him as just a bitter old man. But every battle required a wager. Mateo would gamble on truth. The first gamble, stopping the auto transfer. The $3,250 that had flowed smoothly every month would now vanish. Mateo called River West Credit Union. A young employee's voice answered, "Mr. Delgado, I see a recurring transfer of $3,250 to Lucas Delgado, Wells Fargo. Would you like to cancel it starting this month?" Mateo drew a deep breath. "Yes, cancel it. Effective immediately." Confirmed. The order has been canceled. Mateo leaned back in his chair. For a moment, it felt like a heavy chain had slipped from his neck. But in that same moment, he knew the wager was down. Lucas and Alessia would know the instant the bank flagged a missed payment. 4. Edge. Gaining leverage. Now Mateo needed to seize the edge, not just defend. He began drafting a timeline, each expense, each piece of evidence. He printed 12 copies, hiding them well, but he didn't release them yet. He wanted the Rossis to sink deeper, exposing their greed and arrogance publicly. That night, he pulled out his Canon camera, finding a shot from a party at Lucas's house the month before. Alessia raised a champagne glass, the pricey Kitchen Master mixer behind her. Mateo wrote under it, $2,100, used twice. He pinned photo after photo onto a wooden board. Soon, the wall became a crime map: mortgage transfers, luxury items, fake articles, manipulative emails. A strategist in a builder's clothes, laying bricks once more, but this time, building a plan for vengeance. But the secret ace, the card he would unveil at the end, Mateo kept hidden, unrecorded, anywhere. That would be the strike no Rossi or even Lucas could deny. 3 days after ending the auto transfer, a letter arrived. The Wells Fargo stamp on the envelope delivered straight to his door. Mateo tore it open. Bold letters glared from the top. Notice: mortgage payment delinquent, account in arrears. His eyes froze on the number. $3,250. Overdue. Then another line. If unpaid within 15 days, credit reporting and legal proceedings may follow. Mateo's brow furrowed. He had no legal tie to the Emerald Oaks property, but somehow the Rossis had attached his name as guarantor. It meant if they didn't pay, Mateo would bear the fallout too. He dropped the paper onto the table, fury boiling. This wasn't part of his plan. He thought he had cut the chain. But Carlo Rossi had left another trap. Mateo stared at Elena's photo on the shelf, firelight flickering across his bloodshot eyes. For the first time, he realized this battle wouldn't just be about words and paperwork. Carlo intended to drag him into the mud. Mateo clenched his fist, whispering into the dark like a blade slicing air. They've pushed me to the wall, but I'll strike back, and this time, I won't leave a way out. Outside, a wind chime rattled in the night breeze. Over Silver Ridge, the sky darkened. The real storm was coming. Mateo believed the plan was ready, but this unexpected twist now threatened to blow it all apart. Mateo Delgado stepped into the final phase of his plan. For weeks he had collected, aligned, and forced the Rossis into a trap they never saw coming. Now it was time to execute, brick by brick, as carefully as if he were building a wall. Mateo had canceled the auto transfer. The $250 no longer flowed from his account. He kept the bank confirmation as his shield. Evidence: bank confirmation 12/22/2023, auto transfer 3E250 month, canceled at customer request. This was the milestone. No more money bound him to the Emerald Oaks house. In the dimly lit room, Mateo laid out 12 folders on the table. Each held statements, invoices, social media screenshots, and the newspaper photocopy with the word lies slashed in red. He packed them into large envelopes, numbered 1 through 12. One for each guest at Christmas dinner, he murmured. Rosa stood beside him, eyes worried. Are you sure? This will be a strike right to their face. Mateo nodded. Yes, but it must leave them no escape. On December 24th, the sunset bathed Silver Ridge in red. Mateo wore his old navy suit, the same one from Elena's funeral. He combed his hair neatly, carrying a leather case filled with documents. Inside, he hid a USB drive, storing the digital proof, ready if needed. He drove his worn pickup into Emerald Oaks. Lucas's house glowed bright, cars lining the driveway. Through the window, he saw Alessia laughing, raising a glass of wine, the room alive with light. Mateo drew a long breath and stepped inside. The party fell into sudden silence at his appearance. Alessia froze, face pale. Lucas stammered, Dad, what are you doing here? Mateo didn't answer. He set the case on the buffet table, opened it, and pulled out envelopes, handing them to each guest. People took them, puzzled, then opened. Paper rustled. Then came sharp intakes of breath. A woman whispered, My God, he paid the mortgage for 4 years? The room rippled with shock. Carlo Rossi tried to regain control, voice hard. This is a misunderstanding. Delgado, you're fabricating to ruin my family's reputation. Mateo looked him dead in the eye, calm. These are bank statements. These are invoices I paid. This is the email you sent to the Chronicle. Is that enough? Evidence: printed email, 12/20/2023. Carlo to Patricia. Attached is Delgado's photo. Emphasize abandoned in storm. Make sure it runs before Christmas. One guest flipped the page, brow furrowed. Carlo, this is your digital signature. How do you explain this? The air in the room thickened. Just as Mateo believed the truth was laid bare, Carlo lashed out. He raised his hand, shouting, These files are forgeries. Delgado made them up to cover his unstable mind. And I have proof. From his jacket, Carlo pulled a folder, an old copy of Mateo's medical records from years back, when after Elena's death he had been treated for depression. Carlo roared, Here! He has a history of mental illness. Who trusts a sick man to keep papers just to smear family? The dinner table erupted. Some guests whispered, uncertain. Lucas dropped his gaze, silent. Alessia exhaled in relief, believing her side had turned the tide. Mateo felt his face flush hot. For a moment, it seemed everything he had built might collapse. The crowd was swaying. His plan wavered. He drew a deep breath, steadying himself. He stepped forward, voice low but firm. Yes. I struggled with depression after my wife died. Who wouldn't after losing their partner? But through all of that, I still paid every cent for my son. Those statements don't lie. And if you still doubt... He pulled the USB from his case, plugging it into a laptop nearby. The big screen lit up. A slideshow began. Alessia posing in her new kitchen, Lucas at fine restaurants, captions boasting thanks to hard work. Each photo stamped with dates matching Mateo's transfers. Mateo's voice rang out. This is the truth. I don't need reputation. I need justice. Compare for yourselves. The room hushed. Then murmurs turned. He's right. The timelines match. Another nodded. No unstable man keeps records like this. Carlo faltered, face reddening. Alessia went pale. Lucas slumped in his chair. Mateo had turned the tide at the brink of collapse. The entire room tilted toward him. As the dinner dissolved into chaos, Rossi protesting, guests demanding answers, Mateo stood still, watching. He knew tonight was only the first unveiling. The battles of law, money, and honor still lay ahead. He took a long breath, whispering to himself, eyes locked. Now there's only one last move. The Emerald Oaks dining room shook with tension. Murmurs spread fast as guests passed envelopes of evidence back and forth. No one touched the food anymore. Every eye fixed on Mateo Delgado, standing tall in the yellow light, his hand resting firmly on the case of documents. Carlo Rossi tried to stay composed, his voice tight. This is nothing but theater. He's fabricating lies to humiliate my family. Mateo opened the case, pulled out the final folder, and slammed it onto the table. His voice boomed. You want the truth? This is the evidence, master. Everything I've carried for 4 years. He began turning the pages. The printed email from Lucas to Alessia. Evidence. Email. 12/15/2023. I told Dad, he won't be at Christmas. You and your parents can relax. Mateo said, they cut me out of the very house I paid for. This is the first proof. The Chronicle article. Evidence. Newspaper print. 12/18/2023. Elderly couple stranded for hours. Mateo held up the photocopy ink slashed across the word storm winds. He looked squarely at the crowd. They invented a storm. That day was 55 degrees fairies, sunny. No storm existed. The email from Carlo to the Chronicle editor. Evidence. Email. 12/20/2023. Make sure it runs before Christmas. Emphasize abandoned in the storm. Mateo's voice cut sharp. Here is proof Carlo Rossi orchestrated the smear campaign. The original printed email, Carlo's digital signature. Mateo tossed it onto the table for the guests to pass around. Gasps, whispers of outrage rippled through the room. Mateo paused, scanning faces. His voice dropped, almost a whisper. And now, the thing none of you have seen. He drew out a thin sealed envelope. The guests held their breath. Mateo opened it, pulling out the mortgage contract copy from River West Credit Union. His finger pointed at the bold line, co-signer, Mateo Delgado. This was the face. Mateo's voice struck like a hammer. They didn't just drain my money, they made me a co-signer behind my back, so if they default, I carry the debt. This is the final betrayal, not just moral, but legal. The room exploded. An older guest shot to his feet. Carlo, you tricked a guarantor? That's fraud. Mateo stepped forward, eyes blazing across the crowd. He no longer trembled, he was steel. I stayed silent for 4 years. I endured because of Lucas, because I thought Elena in heaven would want peace. But tonight, in front of you all, the truth cannot be denied. I am no longer their walking wallet. I am no longer their free chauffeur. I am no longer their puppet. He turned to Lucas. My son, look closely. This is the family you chose over your own father. This is the price you now pay. Lucas paled, lips trembling. Dad, I didn't know they signed that contract. Mateo waved a hand. Don't speak. The truth is already clear. The atmosphere shifted completely. The guests, once admiring the Rossis, now turned cold with contempt. A woman in a glittering gown spat out, Alessia, you flaunted your lifestyle online, while your father-in-law broke his back paying. Aren't you ashamed? A local businessman jabbed a finger at Carlo. I trusted you. Now I see it was all a facade. You weaponized the media to smear a father while feeding off his money. Carlo flushed crimson, stammering. You misunderstand. But no one listened anymore. Teresa Rossi collapsed into her chair, pale as paper. Alessia bit her lip until it bled, speechless. Lucas buried his head in his hands, lost in the raw truth. Mateo stood still, letting the silence condemn them. He didn't need to shout, his evidence had spoken. An older man, once Carlo's ally, declared, "Carlo, as of tonight, you have no place in the Silver Ridge Business Council. You abused trust, lied, and manipulated. Your reputation ends here." Chairs scraped back as guests rose one by one, leaving the Rossis slumped at the table. Christmas lights still twinkled, but the glittering dinner had become a public tribunal. Mateo gathered his papers, closed the case. At the door he stopped, glanced back. Justice doesn't need a courtroom. Only truth. And truth, you can no longer escape. The door slammed shut. Inside, the Rossis wilted in humiliation. Outside, Mateo drew a deep breath. Silver Ridge's cold wind filling his lungs, but his heart burned warm. Somewhere above, Elena was surely smiling. Mateo had reclaimed his justice. The Rossis' lost face at the very banquet meant to showcase their pride. The guests had witnessed, and the rumors would sweep through Silver Ridge overnight. Justice was finally served. After that, Christmas night, Silver Ridge never looked at the Rossi family the same again. Carlo was expelled from the business council, stripped of his seat on the local bank board. Teresa found herself uninvited to gatherings. Her elegant afternoon teas became a distant luxury. Alessia bore the heaviest price. Friends turned their backs, her social media filled with mocking comments. The Emerald Oaks house, once a symbol of pride, became a monument of debt and deceit. 3 months later, a letter arrived from the bank. Notice of default. 97 days past due. With no auto transfers and no guarantor, the Rossi family spiraled into crisis. Their lavish home was seized, a foreclosure sign planted on the front lawn. From the heights of social standing, they plunged into ruin, losing everything: their reputation, their wealth, and the community's trust. Meanwhile, Mateo stepped into a new life. With what savings he had left, he repaired the front porch, replaced the yellow bulb that had flickered for years. He allowed himself proper dinners again, walked freely through Maple Creek Park without avoiding suspicious eyes. On the living room wall, beside Elena's photo, he hung a new frame, one of himself with Rosa and her family. Children's laughter filled his Pueblo Heights home each weekend, bringing light back into the little house. Only Lucas remained. One afternoon, he came to his father, not with the confidence he once wore, but with red, tearful eyes. "Dad, I was wrong. If you'll let me, I want to start over." Mateo looked at his son for a long time. He hadn't forgotten the wound, but he didn't want to extinguish the last spark either. He nodded softly. "Respect, Lucas. If you learn that, the door stays open." And in the Silver Ridge sunset, Mateo knew the betrayers had met their downfall, while he had finally found his true family again. In marriage and in family, money can buy a house, but only respect can keep it a home. Mateo Delgado had lived it all, from a devoted father who sacrificed everything, to a man betrayed and humiliated, and finally to someone who stood tall and reclaimed justice for himself. His story was not only a battle against the Rossi family, but also a reminder. Silence in the face of injustice only empowers the cruel, while truth, once revealed, will always prevail. Have you ever been in a situation like this, where you gave everything, yet were met only with disrespect? If you were Mateo, would you have the courage to rise and confront it, as he did? Share your thoughts in the comments. We truly want to hear your own stories. If this video touched your heart, don't forget to hit subscribe to True Revenge Stories, so every day you can hear more powerful revenge stories that echo with real emotion. One like and share from you helps us bring these stories of justice to even more people. And if you want to continue this journey, head over to our Revenge Stories playlist, a place filled with gripping tales, each episode a valuable lesson, each one a truth laid bare.